busting out the Kiss trading cards. All right. There we have some Gene Simmons. Do you remember how cool this was when you were a kid? That this outfit that he had there with those boots and the little shiny squares. I don't know what I remember seeing this. This was, I think that when you got the booklet inside the album Alive 2, this was what he was wearing in there, and it was just, man, it was so cool. I just loved that outfit. So, let's flip it over and see what it says there. Alive. While the Spirit of 76 tour ended on a high note on September 12th of 1976, there were some low points along the way. Peter's 2 demon cat statues were stolen. Oh. Somehow I didn't know about that. Ace was nearly electrocuted in Lakeland, Florida. Yeah, I knew that one. Matter of fact, I think we have a whole video on this channel where I found a newspaper article. This was like a year ago, where I read the news reports about that. There was a bomb scare at a concert in Toledo, Ohio, and the band was handed a bill for damages incurred to the venues by the fans, not to mention the damages the band did to their hotel rooms. Very interesting. That's card number 49, by the way, if you're collecting these at home. Okay. All right, next one. Paul Stanley. That's kind of an interesting shot. Looking, I don't know, kind of a strange look there for Paul, but this is a little bit older. Okay, let's see what this one says. There's Paul. Kiss continued to tour, opening for the likes of Black Sabbath, Oyster Cult, and ZZ Top, but were often met with resentment from the main acts. Kiss was often bumped off tours after intimidating and upstaging the headliners. The band was asked to tone down their effects-filled shows to appease the other acts, but they refused. In retaliation, Kiss embarked on a headlining tour, eventually selling out 12,000-seat arenas. It is amazing looking back at just how famous and how successful Kiss really was. It is pretty remarkable. Here's another older shot. And this was when Ace had the boots that didn't go up very high. They were a little more like, I don't know. They looked like they came off of some, obviously sci-fi thing, but these had a little bit more of a sci-fi look to them somehow, like it could have come out of a 50s sci-fi film. And Ace was so cool. Those Les Pauls he would play, and Paul's boots with the star up the side. Man, do you remember as a kid seeing this stuff, just how awesome it was? Okay, here we go. This is card number 11. With Alive rising on the charts, Kiss was encouraged by their label to appear larger than life in the public eye. To perpetuate the band's growing mystique, photos of the band in front of a private jet were sent to the tabloids to give the image that they were a supergroup, even though Gene, Paul, Ace, and Peter were still traveling on commercial flights. Very interesting. All right, and then here, look at this. Awesome shot of Gene. Man, that look where he had the blood, the residual blood on his face. That was so... Come on. I mean, even if you weren't a Kiss fan, you kind of get it when you're a kid, especially. The superhero, the bad guy thing, man. You know, the super villain stuff that you would get from this, the energy of it, is so great. So cool. Just awesome. Okay, here we go. What does it say on the back? This is card number 44. For Gene, his stage garb became the look he's most associated with. The black spandex top portion of his outfit was covered by a lightweight material made to look like armor with spikes and a separate studded collar. His studded belt was thickened and codpiece enlarged, and he donned thigh-high platform boots resembling reptilian scales with a head of fangs and red eyes at the foot. Yeah, those boots were just too cool. So there's Gene. Awesome. Okay, now, check this out. This is a great shot. Look at this, of Paul and Ace. Ace is playing that killer Les Paul, and you've got, Paul has the outfit that has kind of the stuff that almost looks like shiny veins, and then you've got Ace. I actually loved this particular costume. I liked all of Ace's costumes, but this one, the way the wings came out, Thought that was pretty awesome. And there he has what later would probably be seen as moon boots. Well, yeah, of course. But I mean, we as kids, when we started wearing moon boots in winter to school, that it kind of gives you a different vision now of what he was wearing back then. But they're platform moon boots, for heaven's sake. Not like the stuff you see on Napoleon Dynamite exactly, but either way, they looked so cool. I loved this stuff. That's a great shot of Ace and Ace and Paul at their peak. That's just awesome. Okay, next one. Here we go. Check that out. Paul with the flying V. He and Gene with their hands up in the air. You got Ace down at the bottom there in the middle there with his Les Paul, coming from that same period as the last picture. Man, I loved that flying V that Paul would play too. That shiny thing that was pretty awesome. Yeah, man, they just knew how to put on a show. It was so great. Okay, here's the last one in this pack. There's Paul. Man, what a great shot. There he has the Ace is playing the Sunburst. Oh, did I miss what was on the back of this one? I think I did. For their fourth studio effort, Destroyer, Kiss began recording at Record Plant Studios in New York City with producer Bob Ezrin at the Reigns. Ezrin was intrigued by the phenomenon starting to form around Kiss, known for his creative experimenting. Ezrin brought new elements to the songwriting, such as harmonies and orchestration. Yeah, and Bob Ezrin, of course, he was known, his main thing where he really cut his teeth was with Alice Cooper. And then he got involved with all kinds of things over the years. But he really was largely responsible for all that amazing stuff that they did on Destroyer. That was a turning point for the band, and Bob Ezrin producing it. And when you start talking about orchestration, I mean, Beth, even though it was, a Peter song, Bob Ezrin had a lot to do with that thing. This is I don't know what that is. This is such a cool shot of those two back to back. I don't know how many of you, but when I was a kid, I had a friend named Tom Leet, and we would go in his basement or my basement, and we'd put on the record player, and we'd put on Kiss Alive 2. That's the one we would do most of the time. And I would be Paul Stanley, and he would be Ace or Gene, whichever one he decided at the time, and then we would just be these two and do this. And it was so much fun. It was such a blast back then. Okay, let's see what that says on the back of this one. Destroyer was released on March 15th of 1976, with the first single being Shout It Out Loud, a tune reminiscent of Kiss's previous anthemic hit Rock and Roll All Night. And I'll be honest with you, I thought Shout It Out Loud was a cooler song. I don't know, Rock and Roll All Night was, it's fine, it's cool, it's the anthem, but I thought Shout It Out Loud was a better anthem. I don't know, I like the song more. Let's see here. The tune did little to propel the album up the charts. Two more singles, Flaming Youth and Detroit Rock City, also failed to interest radio listeners. But us fans loved it. I loved Flaming Youth too. And also the way Bob Ezrin produced it, I thought was cool. That was a good tune. And Detroit Rock City, of course. That one's such a classic. What a great tune. Also failed to interest radio listeners. Much to the band's and Casablanca's dismay, Kiss's most anticipated album was failing. But you look back today at that album, Destroyer, and it's like a touchstone in the history of Kiss. It was a turning point. And the story. We've talked about it on this channel before. There they were. They'd put a live put on the map. They were going back in the studio as rock stars. And Bob Ezrin, the story, they're talking about him here. When he walked into the studio, Paul and Gene and the band are feeling a little bit full of themselves because they just put out this live album that's now selling, and where they weren't doing well before, now they're making it, now they're doing well. And Bob Ezrin walks into the studio, and the stories, he's wearing a whistle, and he calls them campers and basically says, guys, you can either go back to what you were doing before and just fail, or you can listen to me and we're going to make a great record. And in the end, they put out Destroyer, and what ended up happening? Well, Beth ended up being a huge hit, and then the rest is history, as it were, because Destroyer ended up doing really, really well. And then of course Rock and Roll Over was awesome. Love Gun was incredible. The story from there, and it just got all the chaos that happened, and it's so much fun. The history of Kiss, I just love it. It's absolutely fascinating.